Diesel tractor update. Yeah, boy. Well, that's the gauge pod. Still needs a little bit of grinding to just get it to sit square against the dash. Kyle tigged it. Came out tits, like it always does, because Kyle did it. So we got that on. It's just mocked up for the time being. Gauges are still a week out because they're custom made. And then this is the single spool hydraulic valve, which is going to power the 3-point on the back. And Kyle made up this nice pivot for it. And I just went out to Tractor Supply. We got some bushings for it, because we need some bushings for it. So I got to trim them down so they'll fit. She's coming along. So basically, it's going to go, this is going to be up, and then, whoops, and then down, and then float. And that's going to be the rear lift. I got this one's all set. The pivot point itself is all set. Where the lever connects to the valve, I need to get different bushings, and then I need to grind the valve down a little bit, or grind that down a little bit because that hits. And then I got to start plumbing it, and this, that, and the other thing, and that's it. All right. So I got the correct bushings for the pivots on the joystick. As you can see, the bolts are a little long, so we're just gonna have to trim them a hair. I took the lever we're using and lengthened it about 3 inches or so. And as you can see, the reason I did that is I wanted more throw on the lever. So like that, there's the neutral position. That is gonna be raise, back to neutral, lower, and then all the way forward is going to be the float. So the cool thing about this is that it's going to have down pressure. So I will have down pressure on whatever 3-point implement I am using. So that'll come in handy, particularly for things like a grater blade. And to a certain extent, moldboard plow, but generally you can get away without down pressure on a moldboard. So next thing I got to do is figure out kind of how we're going to route these hoses, because unfortunately with this valve, everything's going to have to come out and then go whichever way it's going to go. So that's the next thing that we gotta, next hurdle, if you will. All right, so we just got back from Fluid Dynamics, and I got a whole bag of different fittings and stuff, and we're just gonna start threading some shit together and just mocking stuff up. All right, so they're on there. They're, you know, on there. But anyway, so I don't know the exact valving on this valve, so to speak, but I know that these two are going to go to the cylinder, and then one of these is in and one of these is out. So these are obviously pretty self-explanatory. I think what we're going to try and do with these hoses, the two going to the cylinder, are we're going to bring them to the frame, and then we're probably just going to run some P-clips along the tunnel cover, and then just go right back either under or over or around or something the fuel tank, and right to the cylinder, because the cylinder is going to be right there. And then for the front, so basically what we got going on here is this port. Where is it? This port on the box, steering box, is the Power Beyond, or the auxiliary port. So that will be the feed to this valve, meaning that the valve takes backseat in terms of hydraulic priority to the steering valve, meaning that you know, everything goes through the steering box before it goes to the valve, which is what I want, because I'd rather be able to steer and not move the implement than vice versa, should something like that happen. The return side of the valve is a little bit more complicated. Basically, the factory Sears transmission setup had an oil cooler like right about here, and there was a shroud over it, and the whole idea was that cold air generated by the fins on the flywheel of the engine pushed air over that. Anyway, the point is that transmission had a cooler. The Ariens had a fan on the drive shaft as a cooler. This does not currently have a cooler. I would like it to, just because, really. So we're going to be using this transmission cooler, which I showed in a previous video. So what I did, these are 3/8 barbs, and Fluid Dynamics is the shit for anyone who's wondering. They have a 3/8 barb -6 JIC fitting. So we're just going to cut a short piece of hose from this and have JIC fittings. And then the other thing is we've got an all-male T, and now that I think of it, I'm going to need either a male, female, or a coupler, but either way, that's easy enough. And basically the return from this valve and the return from the steering box, which currently goes to the transmission, those two returns are going to be the input to this cooler, and then the output of this cooler is going to go to the transmission. So basically what that means is that, you know, oil comes out of the tranny, it goes to the valve, the steering valve, does whatever it's got to do there, then it goes to the implement lift valve, does whatever it's got to do there, goes through the cooler, and then goes back to the trans. So by the time it goes back to the trans, in theory, it is going to be, you know, cool, so to speak. So at some point also we're going to have to tap in for the temperature sensor, and I think I'll have to do a little bit of reading because I don't have a tranny temp sensor on my truck. I think usually you just go right to the reservoir for that, which in this case would be the rear axle. But I'll figure out what the best place to tap into would be. But that's it. I'm gonna group this together with the clips that you saw earlier. Initially, I didn't think I had enough to make just a tractor video. I thought I was gonna have to roll it into an update, but as it turns out, there is enough. So we're chipping away at it, and that's all I got for today. So next step is gonna be gauges, and then once basically what we gotta do is wrap up everything that happens behind the radiator, and then once everything behind the radiator is done, we can put the radiator in, put the motor back in, and put this whole fucking thing together.